I've seen a lot of discussion lately around adapting D&D 5th edition. Specifically, whether it's better to hack or adapt 5e to fit whatever setting or genre you're trying to run, or to just learn a new system that better fits what you're trying to do. I think this is an interesting issue that often requires a nuanced response. After all, I'm trying to run a murder mystery in D&D is not really the same thing as I'm trying to run Ghostbusters in D&D. In my experience, most RPGs, including D&D 5e, are way more versatile than they first appear, and some people tend to give them credit for. D&D 5e, in particular, can be used for way more things than just killing monsters and getting treasure. You can easily adapt it for heists, horror, mysteries, or other genres you might want to try. It just requires a little bit of tinkering on the GM's part, and an acceptance from the players that things might not be strictly by the book. However, you can learn a lot about how to better run these kind of adventures by checking out different kinds of RPGs that were specifically made to do those things, even if it's just to steal ideas for your 5e games. There are a lot of things that different RPGs have to offer that 5e just cannot. If you've only ever played 5e or 5e hacks, that might not be immediately obvious. D&D will always kinda play like D&D, and that's fine. Your characters will be big, larger-than-life heroes that are cool and generally good at combat and have a lot of fun and neat abilities they can use. And that is great. I love playing that. But when you adapt 5e for other things, you will still be bringing a 5e character into that situation. Now, that can be a lot of fun. Often, the friction between what the system supports and what you're trying to do can lead to some fascinating and engaging games. And that can be a rich vein to explore. How are a wizard, cleric, and ranger going to successfully rob a bank and not just kill everyone inside? Having to find clever new uses for your abilities and spells in a setting that they're not originally designed for can be a lot of fun. But that friction is not something you always want in your game. That might not be the story you want to tell, or the story you always want to tell. Say, for example, you want to do a campaign centered around a series of heists, with characters designed to do heists, with bespoke mechanics that support heists. Then you're probably just better off playing something designed to do heists. But it also doesn't make much sense to change the system you are using if you want to include a heist in your current campaign because another system does that one particular thing better. Where I've seen D&D 5e really stumble is when you try and take away the things that it does well for the sake of the story you're trying to tell or the setting you're trying to adapt or create. If you take out the magic, the heroic characters, or the systems it uses for combat, you can just be left with a weird husk of a game. For example, adapting 5e for something like a modern-day Ghostbusters game would be an absolute nightmare. You would have to cut out most of what makes 5e work and come up with a whole host of systems to replace what you took out. I'm not saying this could not be done, or even that it could not be done well. But there are also a lot of games that would require a lot less time and effort to get something like this to work, including the actual official Ghostbusters RPG that exists. On the other hand, people also need room to experiment in their games, especially those new to the hobby. Sometimes people will see something in a system that you do not. Occasionally, it can be really interesting to use an RPG for a setting or a game that it was not originally designed for. To push systems out of their comfort zone and see what happens. Conventional wisdom would say that you would not use the Call of Cthulhu to run a superhero game. But what if you wanted to run a Watchmen game? Well, that could be a really interesting fit. One of my absolute favorite RPGs I've ever gotten the opportunity to play did this. It was a D&D 5e game where we played as level 5 adventurers that ran a bar and had to deal with the problems that came up with trying to run a business in a fantasy setting. The game was mostly a series of short vignettes where the GM would set up a scene and we would figure out a way to deal with it. One particularly fun scene involved 3 rogues who showed up and began arguing about who would get to skulk in the one and only dark corner we had. How are we going to solve this without losing all 3 of them as customers or getting stabbed? This was a fantastic campaign. We constantly had to reevaluate and find new uses for our abilities and spells that would help us solve the bar's problems. Conventional wisdom would tell you that there was probably a better system for running the game, but it was that friction between the setting and 5e's mechanics that made this game truly special. You should definitely try out different games if that's something that interests you. If for no other reason, then it will give you ideas to make your current game better, and provide you with new perspectives and open you up to entirely new styles of gameplay. This is also not something you need to rush into. If you're having fun with 5e or whatever game you're currently playing, don't feel you need to just change things if it's working perfectly fine. But if you're starting to feel dissatisfied with your current game, or you have a cool idea that you're not quite sure how to make work, or you just want to see what else is possible in RPGs, then I encourage you to go out and try a new system. You never know what you're going to find. Get out of here, Shadowrun. You're complicated, obtuse, and I don't understand a lot of your systems. No one wants you here. Oof, that was a long episode. Thank you for joining us. If there's a question about RPGs you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to see us cover in the future, just let us know in the comments. Until next time.